and the Word became flesh. That has to be the most explosive verse ever recorded, the most explosive idea ever to cross the human mind. When referring to Jesus, the eternal Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, at the beginning of his gospel, John talks about him as the Word. In the very first line of his gospel, he begins this way. He says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." When we hear that, in the beginning, it conjures up Genesis, the book of Genesis, which begins in the same way, in the beginning. It makes us think of the beginning of material creation. But when John's talking about in the beginning was the Word, he has so much more in mind than that. His vision is so much larger. He certainly includes the beginning of material creation, that Jesus was there. In fact, as he will say in the next few verses, nothing that exists could exist without Jesus. He's the creator of all. But what John is thinking of more than that is Jesus' eternal nature. He's thinking of how Jesus transcends space and time. He's beyond space and time. He's thinking about how Jesus existed prior to in the beginning. In other words, the language of in the beginning, temporal language, doesn't really even make sense when talking about the Word, because his existence as the great I Am, as God himself, transcends all that. He's existed outside before there was space and time. He's the one that made space and time. So he exists beyond all of that. Along with the Father and the Holy Spirit, he exists in absolute transcendence. You couldn't say anything higher, anything greater about Jesus than that he is the Word that existed in the beginning. But then, just a few short verses later, verse 14, John goes on to say, and he says it in a way that he's celebrating it, he's proud, he's boasting, he's saying it boldly. He says, "And the Word became flesh." The Word that transcends space and time, that goes beyond space and time, that invented space and time, made space and time, enters into space and time with a mortal body. And not only that, John stresses, he uses a very provocative word here. John stresses Jesus' true humanity. Instead of using the normal Greek word for human being, anthropos, which he uses earlier, in verse 4 he uses it when he's talking about people. Instead of using that word, John uses the word sarx, which translates as flesh. In other words, he wants to emphasize, he wants to stress that Jesus really became human, a flesh and blood human being. He wasn't just acting. He wasn't like an actor in a play, playing the role, playing the part, pretending that he was human, appearing in human form, but retaining the prerogatives of his divinity so that he was shielded from all the things that we are vulnerable to, all the weakness, all the vulnerability that we feel. No, what John is saying is that he entered into all of that. He was in it with us completely, totally, like us in every way except sin. The Word became flesh, real flesh and blood. This has to either be, depending on your perspective, the most ridiculous and repulsive thing ever uttered, ever to cross the human mind, or it has to be the most explosive and amazing thing humankind has ever heard. For no other religion comes anywhere close to claiming anything like this. For every other belief system, most of the other belief systems, the idea of God, the transcendent God becoming a human being, is utterly blasphemous. And for those few belief systems that do believe that the gods have somehow appeared in human form, they do believe in incarnations of the gods, they are purely docetic. In other words, when a God appears in human form, he is just play acting. He's just like an actor in a play. He's not really taking on human flesh. He's not becoming like you and me. He's just appearing like a human being, but still retains all the prerogatives of his divinity. That's why the early church met with such hostility in those first few centuries. The first few Christian generations met with such hostility because the idea of the Word made flesh for Jews was utterly scandalous. To them, it was absolutely repulsive, the height of blasphemy. And for Greeks, for everybody else, the Gentiles, it was absolutely foolish. It was utterly ridiculous. It was laughable to think that the transcendent God who created space and time could then come within, or would want to come within, or be willing to come within space and time itself. That's why we can be pretty sure that this is something that no human being would have invented, or better yet, would have dared to invent. It has to be something that has been revealed to us by divine revelation. When I, in a while back around Christmas, was trying to make sense of the idea of the Word made flesh, what we celebrate around Christmas time, I used the example from Undercover Boss, the popular TV show where a CEO of a corporation takes on a disguise and goes undercover as one of his or her employees. I used the example of the first episode I saw, and I think it was the first episode ever, where the CEO of Waste Management goes undercover as one of his employees. At the beginning of the episode, it's the crack of dawn, and he's pictured in his mansion, his palatial mansion, getting ready for work for the day. He puts on a designer suit, and then he gets into one of a number of luxury cars that he has, who's driven by a chauffeur, and the driver chauffeurs him to his office, a very fancy corporate office, his corporate office. And when he gets into the office, there he then gets out of the designer suit and gets into overalls and work boots, and then has a makeup artist give him a disguise so that for the rest of the day, and the rest of that week he was undercover, for the rest of that day he was assigned to a two-person crew on one of his trucks. He was riding shotgun with a driver, and they went around and they collected trash. So here the CEO of Waste Management is lifting these big bins of trash and throwing them into the back of one of the trucks. Every once in a while, those trucks, the compactor arms in those trucks get jammed up with garbage, so somebody has to go in and pull all the garbage out. Well, the person riding shotgun in the truck, that's their responsibility. So, and this is the most vivid and memorable image from the show, at least for me, is seeing the CEO of Waste Management jumping into the back of one of his trucks. In the midst of all the trash, he's standing in the trash, pulling out the garbage, picking through the trash, the stinky, nasty, grimy trash, rotting trash that is stuck in the compactor arms. Now, mind you, he's still the CEO. He at any moment could reveal himself as CEO and take back all the prerogatives of his position. He could go back to his corporate office, put on the designer suit, and have everybody, quote unquote, bowing to him, metaphorically bowing to him, be in charge again. But he's willingly picking through the garbage because he wants to experience everything that his employees experience. He wants to know what their lives are really like, and this is the only way he can do it. He still is the CEO. That's his identity. That's who he truly is. And he can take back those prerogatives at any moment, but he has willingly emptied himself, forfeited those prerogatives so he can have the same experience that they have. And so, there in that moment, he's actually really picking through the trash. It's not an appearance, it's not pretend. He's really picking through that dirty, grimy, nasty, stinky trash. At the end of those episodes of Undercover Boss, the CEO reveals him or herself to their employees, to the employees that they worked with during those several days, that week that they went undercover. And in what may be the most touching moments of the show, the CEO has learned something about their employees that otherwise they never would have known, about some of the hardships that they face, what their lives are really like, and some of the struggles they have. And they want to do something about it. Because they've learned that, because they entered into their experience, they feel real compassion for them and want to help them out. They never would have known about those hardships, been able to feel that compassion for their employees if they didn't enter into the experience, though. And that's what makes us love these shows so much, love a show like Undercover Boss so much, why it's so popular. Because we love it when the CEO, the boss, gets in it, gets down and dirty with their employees, is in it with them, is picking through the trash with them. We love that. And we love when they can relate, when they understand the experience, when they have that experience themselves, go through that experience themselves. The Word made flesh may be the most ridiculous or repulsive concept ever to cross the human mind. It may appear completely ridiculous and repulsive, but it's the only way that a transcendent God can actually know what it's like to be us. It's the only way that the God who exists outside of space and time can enter into our experience, can be in it with us. It's the only way that the transcendent God can truly have compassion for us. The Word made flesh means that the CEO of the universe freely, willingly emptied himself of all his divine prerogatives in order to start picking through the messiness, the trash of our human condition, our human lives. The Word made flesh means that God gave up the bliss of heaven, heavenly bliss, in order to enter into the fragility, the brokenness, the vulnerability of our humanity. The Word made flesh means that Jesus gave up his transcendence, the transcendence that is the essence of his nature, in order to take on a body that would be broken on the cross. The Word made flesh. There is no greater way that God could possibly love us. God couldn't possibly love us more. So what do you think of the Word made flesh? Is it ridiculous to you? Is it repulsive? Or is it explosive and amazing? You could tell me your thoughts by going to the Contact EJ page of the Raising Jesus website and leaving them there. I look forward to hearing from you.